Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word that is in danger of losing its meaning altogether. This podcast is produced by Outlast Consulting, LLC, a boutique consultancy that helps companies use innovation principles to solve their toughest business problems. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm so excited to have James Quinn. James Quinn is the Executive Managing Director at JLL, a Fortune 500 company considered the leading technology real estate advisor globally, at the forefront of technology and real estate, having intimately worked with many of the largest corporations in the world. Based in New York, James leads a group of technology and real estate professionals that provide advisory services to Fortune 500 companies and leading technology firms. James has completed over 35 million square feet of global real estate projects. He has been very passionate throughout his career on the impact of technology in the business and real world. James, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited for this conversation. I know I'm going to learn a lot.
Jared, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Why don't we just dive right in? Tell me, in your mind, what is innovation?
I think innovation is really kind of looking at kind of the current state and then what technologies or, in terms of procedures or processes that you're going to really utilize to improve the current state. I think we're at a very exciting time. I love the name of your podcast show because everybody should be talking about this. And it's something that I think is critical, not only, to really your current state, but like where the world is going and how we can take advantage of that.
Yeah, well said. The world is changing every day, and keeping that in mind is so important. I love your definition because it's so connected to the current state and looking forward versus, sometimes people can look at innovation as something that you do on the side or you do kind of out of curiosity or tinkering, to kind of just explore. But having that understanding of where am I currently, what's my current state, and how am I going to move forward from that, I think is a really important aspect of what innovation really means.
Great. Yeah, no, I think that I've been fortunate kind of being in real estate for all of my career, just to see how innovation has really changed the real estate game in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of inspired me to really dive in more on innovation and the research and how it was impacting different industries and different parts of our lives, because especially today, with the digital transformation and really that, being accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic,
right.
Very interesting time in our lives to really see how a lot of things are changing, I think, for the good.
Yes, I agree. When you use the term digital transformation, what does that mean to you?
So digital transformation is really kind of looking at every aspect of a corporation in terms of what their workplace strategy is, what their technology strategy is, really even getting into the, very important areas as corporate culture.
Right.
And in terms of what a company stands for. I think that it's super important because looking at that transformation to really make the organization better from a culture standpoint, from a financial performance standpoint, for a sustainability standpoint, and really what are important things for the worker as well as the company is critical.
I agree. There's so many different forms of value within a company. There's the value that the employees derive from working at a company. There's the financial value to the shareholders, to the employees and what have you. There's the value to the, environment and society as a whole. And I love that you kind of highlighted all those different forms of value and how digital transformation touches on all those things. It's not an IT project. I mean, I think
absolutely.
A lot of people just see it as, okay, well, you're going to put in high-speed internet or you're going to upgrade the Wi-Fi or whatever, and we're going to get some new software, and then that's our digital transformation. But there's so much more to it.
I'll give you an example. So one of the companies that we're working with, I think we're very astute that they have a position, they call him the Chief Transformational Officer. His job is to look at everything, digital transformation, technology, corporate culture, and really kind of look about it's almost a blank canvas. And a lot of organizations are doing this. It's like they're starting with a blank canvas. We have an opportunity, right? Because, before the pandemic, I would clearly come in the office 5 days a week.
Right.
right? And if you weren't in the office, you're like, where's Quinn? Why isn't he here today? Right?
Yeah.
Out of that mentality.
Right.
Now it's, really, people love that they got some time back of their lives that they don't have to commute. And, now we're kind of in a hybrid model whereby you want to collaborate with your teammates and your team in the office, and you'll do that for a couple of days. But then you also have some remote work time that also is effective and is quality as well. That's why I'm excited to be on here today, because it's all about innovation. And if companies are hiring a chief transformational officer that's really reporting to the CEO, that's at the level that it's, that's where what it's reached and how important it is.
That is a great indicator of importance, because investing in that role from a financial standpoint, paying someone at that level to do that work is a significant investment, but then also wiring that role into the organization where people have to feel accountable to a person outside of their direct line management to answer to someone who has responsibility that cuts across all the different functions. That's a big organizational investment, because it's not easy to get finance and marketing and sales and research and development to now have to answer to someone who's saying, yes, that would be what's best for you and your department, but there are these other unintended consequences over here that we're going to factor in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a bit more about your industry. I grew up in the consumer goods space, and I'm just fascinated about your industry and how it works from an innovation standpoint.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm currently executive managing director at JLL. JLL is a Fortune 500 company, and we're global. We have a huge global platform, and we work with Fortune 500 companies, high growth technology companies, and really to help them with their traditional real estate portfolios. But also, I bring a lot of expertise on the technology portfolios.
I see.
Yeah. So, it's really kind of like when you look at what's your strategy for in going forward, and to my earlier comments, that COVID really has turned everything upside down. It's really, I think it's kind of been a positive reset, because everybody's looking at their organization to see, what, how can we make it better? How can we make our employees more engaged? What can we do to feel that they're appreciated in the workplace? And also we're getting productivity, and we're hitting our targets that we have to. So I think it's a really good time, because looking at their traditional office space, how do they transform that? How do they transform their technology portfolio? So, I've kind of been at the forefront of that. And it's been really interesting, because our firm has a very strong reputation on providing, quality advice, similar to when you were at McKinsey, on everything global real estate issues, which is obviously a very important area of a firm's business.
Right. And that reputation is so valuable in the space and so hard earned. I can imagine it kind of placed you all sort of at the forefront of when people started grappling with this problem as far back as 2 years ago. We're in March of 2022. I mean, this has been going on for 2 years. So I can imagine you've probably been in the conversation with the leaders of these large companies for quite a while now.
Yes, we've been at the forefront of that. And it's been a very interesting place to be, because if you look at installations prior to COVID, some organizations were really trying to maximize efficiency. So like you would have the bench seating. So, when you think about it, bench seating doesn't really work in the COVID-19 environment.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all of a sudden you have some issues.
Right.
And, so as a result, firms, and we've been talking to them and providing them advice in terms of everything has to be reimagined, and it's really gone from kind of having cubicles and offices to, okay, how can we have a bespoke workplace whereby you want to engage with other people when you are working in your office that day. And if you talk to some of the greatest architects, they're very busy right now, because they're really trying to create a very interesting and comfortable and productive workplace. It's all also about, they're doing it because it's the right thing to do for their employees, but it's also for the war of talent. I mean, from a recruiting standpoint, you really have to put a lot into your space and your corporate culture and how you respect your employee if you're going to get the best and brightest to work at your firm.
Well said. Well said. I can imagine there are probably different camps of companies, probably some who line up with your thinking and get your advice and heed it in terms of evolving and innovating that space and bringing new technologies and new physical structure to bear in this space. I can imagine there are also probably folks who would say, you know what, we turned the lights out on this date. We're just going to turn them back on and we're going to send an email and tell everybody they need to be back at work on this date.
You kind of perfectly hit the next area that I want to talk about, because they are different approaches and they're two different camps. So, to give you an example, like some financial institutions, they're investing a lot in terms of bringing people back to the workplace. And their attitude is that they want to try to get people in as much as possible.
Right.
The days of 5 days a week are kind of over, but and as many days that they can get in, if it's 4 or if it's 5, that's what their objective is, because they want everybody together, which, listen, that makes sense. And there's,
Sure.
And there are going to be people, if you're in the financial services industry, that's what's expected. But then you have technology companies, and I'll kind of give you an example. Was that I had a dinner with somebody on the financial services side, and they're like, look, we want to get our people under one roof. We want to get them together. And we're gonna invest in our workspace and make it like state of the art and fantastic, but we want them there.
Right.
But then you have technology companies that are at the other spectrum, where they're saying to their employees, you know what, you decide where you want to work. So if you're in Silicon Valley right now, if you wanted to work in New York City, we're okay with that. It's all about kind of you regulating your productivity with the environment that you think is conducive to you being the most productive.
Right.
That's on the complete other side. And so you have people that are in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, they want to move to New York, or you have New Yorkers wanting to move and check out California or Chicago.
Right.
And then there's a group that, like, I think, it was announced that Twitter said, look, if you guys want to be remote, in terms of an employee, we're totally fine with that. And we're okay with it. And then organizations with that mentality, instead of, having people collaborate at the office, they're basically doing special experiential trips. That's where you bond with your clients. So to your point, it's kind of all over the map, and it is a little bit industry specific.
Those are fantastic examples. Thanks for sharing those. It really does bring it to life, because you read in the news everywhere about Google's bringing their people back this date, or, this financial services company is bringing their people back on this date, or what have you. But it's so abstract in the way it's discussed in the news. You don't really get the full picture of all the different ways people are choosing to manage their workforces. And I think the digital transformation focus of all industries right now is creating a lot of overlap in those industries. So I would imagine there are people leaving school and, working at other places who are considering jobs with financial services companies and with technology firms. So they're comparing the different types of work environments and factoring that into their decision making.
That's exactly right. I'll give you an example. I have, two sons, and one of him is in the financial services sector. And, again, they're expected to be at the office, not 5 days a week, but pretty much. And they're, and it's also, it's not as flexible, where my older son is in the music industry, whereby he had 2 job opportunities that he wanted to consider. Actually, for him, it worked. He picked a remote position over the other one because he thinks he's more efficient in terms of working remotely than he is commuting into the city or whatever to their job. So you're spot on that it is different. And, it kind of like, if you're looking at jobs today, that's some of the calculus that you're going to really kind of review on what's the better path for you.
Right.
Which is great when you think about it, because we never had those options historically.
No, I was just thinking back to my college decisions about where to work, and it was as much about the city as it was about the company.
Right.
I ended up at Procter & Gamble, and I didn't know much about Cincinnati. So I just ultimately said the value of working at P&G was worth the risk, the perceived risk of moving north from Alabama. But that was the decision I had to make. And you're right. The whole calculus around that entire process is just different now.
Yeah. Well, a month ago, or I think it was a month and a half ago, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a good article in the Wall Street Journal about American Express.
Mm.
And American Express actually said, look, this is going to be our kind of playbook going forward in terms of our workplace.
Oh,
If you want to work remotely, totally fine with that. If you want to be a hybrid, we're perfectly fine with that. And then if you want to, be at the office 5 days a week, we're okay with that too.
huh.
And they really had 3 different groups that you could work in. And they really kind of the way they laid it out, I think it was efficient.
Yeah.
It gave people choices because if you're an urban professional and you're in your 20s and you have a studio apartment, and you know what? You want to come to the office.
Right.
You want to,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
You want to walk up Madison Avenue and go to lunch, and you don't want to be in your studio apartment for the whole day. So
Yeah.
it really kind of, it wasn't like they were trying to fit everything, but it was kind of like, we want you to excel and you pick what's best for you, which I think was a good, and a lot of corporations are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. You mentioned that you have expertise in the physical real estate space, but also in the technology and bringing technology to life. Those have suddenly, or maybe not suddenly, but in the last 5 or 10 years, and most specifically in the last 2 years, become almost complementary skill sets, much more than they had been in the past, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I think that you bring up a very good point where 5 or 10 years ago, when you said technology, like, oh, that's IT, what's going on with my printer, or why can't, what's up with my computer? But now it's like really the CIOs of organizations, they have a major seat at the table.
Mm.
Chief transformational officers now have a major seat at the table in terms of what the vision and the focus of organizations are going forward.
Right.
And I think that because everyone realizes that your technology is so important and innovation is so important that, you don't want to be left behind. You want to be ahead of the curve.
Mm.
So I think that on the technology side is that it was kind of the thing of, going back to your earlier question on innovation. I came up with the idea with my skill set and some of the real estate experiences I had early on in my career. I really not only understood the traditional, but I was at also the forefront of technology. And I decided to really put resources for the technology where we're considered one of the industry leaders in terms of advising firms on not only the traditional piece, but the technology piece, because now they're intertwined.
Right.
Before it was off on its own,
Right.
but now it's really cohesive. And that's why, I think, people recognize that it's a pretty good place to be. And that's why we've been very busy.
Mm. Yeah, it's almost like you were a step ahead of the world and the world just kind of caught up to your way of thinking.
Well, I think it was a little luck. It was a little trying to be, just like, we talked about earlier today, is that you start your year off every year. The moment you get complacent in terms of anything that you do, just my opinion, that means like you're stuck.
Right.
And nobody wants to be stuck. I'm always trying to be innovative and try to learn from, what's worked, what's not worked, to really, move it for the future. When I saw this, I was like, wow, I think this is a good opportunity and I got to pursue it. And, I feel fortunate that it has come to fruition, which is great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You've gone to the trouble of kind of collecting your thoughts and your insights over your career for the benefit of me and the rest of the world. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. When COVID started, we have an office in New York, and we also have an office in Stamford, Connecticut, was close to where I live.
Mm-hmm.
So, then we got the notification that, like, guys and gals, we're closing the office. Everything's closed. So I've been working, kind of going to the office environment for a long time.
Right.
So from that standpoint, I'm like, well, I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm going to have to figure this out because, working from home wasn't just really ever something that I did. Occasionally on Fridays or the summertime, you would do it.
Right.
So I thought at the time, since I'm going to have a little bit more time, I've always wanted to write a book on technology and kind of the impact, what I've seen in terms of how it changed real estate. I was very curious in terms of how it changed different facets of life and business and every aspect of life. Like what was the impact? So that was what led me to write Tech Trends 24/7 and the impact of COVID-19. I have to tell you, Jared, at first, I didn't think it was a good idea because I probably spent 3 or 4 weeks with serious writer's block and I didn't know what I was going to say. Really looking at a blank computer screen on what I was going to type.
Right.
But like with anything in life, you keep at it and then, really started to come together. And then, we published the book, and I feel very fortunate. It was reviewed and recommended by CIO Insight, which is a very well-respected
Oh, wow.
think tank for CIOs.
Yeah.
And they put it on their recommended books for CIOs list, which, was a phenomenal thing. And I was very happy about.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And it just really looked at kind of, corporate technology. What were the key technologies that are going to affect our lives with artificial intelligence, 5G, digital twin, Internet of Things, and how it's impacting, just everything, smart cities, sustainability for cities.
Right.
Then I wanted to make, some more interesting things in terms of how it's changed fashion and sports. So it turned into a great project, and I'm glad I did it.
Oh man, it sounds awesome. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's coming up.
All right.
And I'm looking forward to it.
I'm going to get you a signed copy now.
Oh man, I didn't want to ask, but since you offered,
absolutely,
I'd love it.
Absolutely, it's on its way.
Awesome. You used a word that is near and dear to my heart, and I think core to innovation, which is curious and curiosity. It's clear from the way you described the evolution of the book that you were following your natural curiosity. How do you think that curiosity has sort of played out for you in your career as it relates to getting into new areas or exploring new things?
I think it's one of the pillars of what I've been about since I've started my career, just because I'm always interested if there's a better way to do something and there's a more effective way and it's good for me to do, I'm in. I want to be all about it. And I think that it's important to really have that as part of your fabric because, just like what I said, I was struggling with writer's block at the beginning, but I was still committed and I was still curious about it. And it was something that I was like, you know what, just keep at it, because the things that I've learned from the research of the book, I think if there's something that I could, kind of promote to people, become a student of technology. Understand in terms of look at how you're doing everything in your business each day. And like, what can you do better? What are your competitors doing? What are they leveraging in terms of technology?
Right.
Because if you don't do that, if you don't take that inventory that we were talking about, you are going to be left behind, and you want to always be ahead, not behind.
Right. Well said. You've got this Fortune 500 company. You've got all these resources sitting in the middle of this Fortune 500 company. How do you promote a mindset of curiosity, identify it in others? Is it something you look for when you're building your team? Is it something you coach people around? Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big part of kind of the recruitment process that we do in terms of my team members. We have a very diverse team as it relates to skill set. For example, I have one of my key team members is not only a real estate attorney, but he's also a technology attorney.
Oh, wow.
So clients love him because if there's a real estate issue, he's very versed in terms of very good advice, as well as we've been, working together for a long time, and he's seen like all the technology projects that we've done. And he's been at a big part of that, advising them from a technology standpoint, what people should be doing. And he's somebody who's very curious, very bright intellectually. And it's just like with anything, we always want to continue to learn.
Right.
And I think that's a key driver in terms of the people that we talk to bring to our organization.
Makes sense. It's common to find people who are curious. I'm always curious about how they find other people who are curious. I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
We talked a bit about what innovation is. Any thoughts on what isn't innovation?
That's a good question. What's not innovation is, it's like the opposite of being curious, right? What's not innovation is that, your head is stuck in the mud and you don't want to see what's going around you, which I don't think that's a place anybody wants to be.
No.
So I think what's not innovation is really just being complacent and really not, putting the time and the effort intellectually and to really kind of continue to follow trends and see what things are changing in different exciting areas. You probably heard, the NFTs and non-fungible tokens. I'm just starting to become a student of that. And it's fascinating. I mean, it's like this whole different industry whereby, when you sell it or, it doesn't have to be art, but with art, you have actually a digital transaction that's based on the blockchain.
Right.
Very interesting in itself and in terms of how it's transforming the entire art industry or the collectibles industry. So that's something that I think is important. So I think what's not technology, if you just kind of continue day in and day out, year after year, doing the same thing.
Hmm.
And for me, I mean, if somebody wants to do that, more power to them. I have nothing against that, but
Right.
it's not what I'm about. I'm the opposite. I always want to be kind of ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more. And what's really neat to me is your definition of innovation is rooted in the current state, and your definition of what isn't innovation is rooted in the current state. But it's really your mindset and your attitude about how you view it. In your innovation definition, it's the current state is a stepping off point for the future and understanding where you are so you can think ahead.
Exactly.
And then, as you talked about what isn't innovation, it sounded a lot like current state feeling like status quo, and this is what the world should be, and kind of being stuck in that mode of thinking.
Definitely.
Before I let you go, I just want to take an opportunity to see if you have any advice. What advice would you have for innovators?
In terms of advice, I think continue to be curious, right? Continue to always try to reinvent in terms of what you're doing.
Mm.
And look, it's not easy. I mean, there are times where you want to try something. With me, there's some things I tried that they were a failure. It just didn't, that aspect of it didn't work out.
Right.
But what I learned from it was, okay, well, that doesn't work. But if we tweak it, well, then maybe that will work. As I'm losing my voice. So I think that the advice would be to be a student of technology, continue to stay curious. Don't get discouraged if, for whatever reason, what you're doing doesn't happen, because if you keep at it and keep tinkering and really leveraging and doing your competitive analysis of what people are successful that are doing in your industry, you're guaranteed success if you just keep at it.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. That is great advice for all of us. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you making the time to talk with us. I look forward to getting my signed copy of your book and diving into that.
Absolutely.
And thanks for your education on the real estate world. I didn't have a clear picture of what innovation would look like in that space, but your description of the interplay between technology and the physical space and the different ways people leverage that space made it very clear. So thank you for that.
My pleasure, Jared. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think I really like the focus of your podcast, and there should be more discussion on this. So I think you're spot on in terms of, really kind of generating a very important discussion. So thank you for your time, and hope you have a great rest of the week.
All right. Take care. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this week's show. You can drop us a line on Twitter at Outlast LLC, OUTLAST LLC, or follow us on LinkedIn where we're Outlast Consulting. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.